All right, so today I'm going to talk about going from blocking to polish directly. This is not going into splines. This will be a workflow where I just take a pose-to-pose animation and just straight up go to polish mode. And that's how I usually work because, I work for games and I just have to work fast. All right, so all of my characters selected. I'm going to go from tangents and I'm going to turn this into auto and make sure our keys are set to auto. Let's do non-weighted tangents. So now I have this very clean animation. It's kind of like almost OCD a little bit. Every 3 frames, 2 frames, there's a pose, which is okay. But I don't want to keep it this way because you can kind of see that like it's not offsetted too much. And I'm going to talk about how to exaggerate, how I go directly from this to polish. So the first part is we'll be working with the root control, this area here. And I'm just going to look at this section as like a bouncing ball, right? And I have this ball here. I'm just going to hit this, hit P. And then let's just zero this out so we get a better understanding of those hips. So literally, I'm just going to look at the hips as a bouncing ball and start offsetting things. And one thing that a lot of animators like to do is they like to keep their graph editor very clean. They don't like to offset things left and right. But I'll be doing a lot of offsetting like this left and right while the snap key is off, right? I don't want to be organized at this point anymore. I want to turn this off. And this one I learned from Richard Lico, where, he taught us how to do like in between. So credit to him. Not in between, sorry, just going into splines and just offsetting things without having the offset key on. All right, so let's start working with hips. So the first thing I like to do is I like to go to a front view like this or a side view. I really don't like working with like the perspective view in the beginning. So I'm just going to look at that bouncing ball and we're just going to start offsetting things left and right. So one thing that I like to do is, one tip that I can give you guys is that if this is your timeline here, it goes this way, right? A lot of like, if you're going to the future, you're going from this. If you're reading something, you start from the left screen and you just go this way. Same thing with the graph editor. It goes this way, right? If you hit play, you can see that thing going this way. So if I offset something left or right, I will delay it, right? If I offset it this way, which is screen left this way, it will hit earlier in time. That key will hit earlier in time. If I drag it this way, we will lag that key. So that's how I think about it, right? If I want something to hit earlier, and when I say hit, just hitting that key, this goes on top of it, right? If I drag it this way, it will hit later. So just like the bouncing ball, I'm just going to keep adding more keys and just make this curve more interesting. As you can see, like it's kind of like boring here. It's too smooth, right? Especially like here, I'm looking at this area. I'm looking at this area. It's not very appealing. So I'm going to share the hotkey down below somewhere. It's the ACK slice curve tool. And you'll see what that does here. So if I hit Alt-S, I have it assigned to Alt-S. It's basically insert a key. And it will just add a key there for me without breaking the curve. So I can go in there and I can, start adding. I can start adding keys and I can just drag these left and right. So let's say I want more hang time here. I can set a key. I can do some overshoot. And then let's say I want this to hit earlier, I can drag it this way. Remember, hotkey, snap keys is off. So I'm not very organized. And I can go in there and I can add more keys. I can add like jitters and stuff like that, right? So my curves, they don't have to be perfect because working with motion capture, you can kind of see that you have a lot of like jittery keys and it gives that a live feeling to your animation. So let's go back to the graph editor and let's start shaping our curves a little bit more here. So I'm going to scrub. Let's really like zoom into it and let's just scrub. So let's say I want to hit earlier here. I can do something like that. And I'm ignoring what the rest of the body is doing. I'm just looking at that ball. Some animators, they like to hide, different body parts. But I'm just going to squint and ignore what the rest of the body is doing. Maybe you can dip down here a little bit. See that? So he pops up slightly here. Let's make this go up later here. So I'm dragging it here this way. And let's just make this curve a little bit less perfect. So there's like a mini bounce in there. Here he goes down. Maybe I can hang this a little bit more up here. And then when he hits, I want the body to jiggle a little bit. And adding that jiggle and the blocking would be too much, right? So I can do that inside the graph editor by dragging this down like that. I can add another key here. I can make that curve straight, right? So you kind of see that little bounce there. All right. So this curve looks boring. And another cool trick here is using buffer curves. So you can go to curves, buffer curve, take a snapshot of it, and it will tell you what you had before. So I can, break this curve. I can delete keys, but I can always go back to what I had before as a reference point there. So here, let's give him more hang time. Let's dip him down a little bit more. And on this hit, I want him to jiggle a little bit. So maybe he can go down, go up, and then go down again. Let's bring him up slightly. Let's pop him up like a double bounce when he hits. There you go. And this curve looks super boring, and I'm just going to add more keys here to make it more easing out. And I'm not looking for perfection with my curves. That's a lot of animators, they do that where they make the curve look super smooth and your animation ends up looking super smooth. Okay. Let's drag this out this way. Cool. Now let's work on the side to side motion. I'm going to go to world mode. And I'm going to look here. Let's see. Let's say I want him to go more this way. I'm hitting Alt S to add more keys so I can shape up my curves. We can add another bounce here. Turn that flat. Let's make him jitter this way as well. So as you can see, I'm adding those overshoots and jitters in the graph editor versus like blocking out the whole thing, because it would take forever to block out like a jitter. Something subtle like this. Let's exaggerate that a little bit. You can kind of see it here. Okay. This is too smooth, fast here. I'm going to make this slower. Let's go down here. And I spend the most of my time with the root control. So I want to get that right. When I go to the spline, when I go to the torso and the head, I won't spend a lot of time on it. So here from the side view, he's losing balance. Here, I can fix this by just moving this like that. See what it gives me. Okay, let's see. Here, I don't want him to lose balance. He can come down here. And let's just stretch this out. And I'm looking at those dead curves. I don't want these dead curves. This is a problem whenever you're working like in step mode. You will usually get these like dead curves. That's why I prefer to block out my shots in spline mode while my graph editor is open, so I can see that I'm not having any dead curves. Yeah, let's look at it from here. I look at it from the top view as well. And sometimes I just hit 7. Make sure my poses are clear. And I'm just looking at that ball right now. So yeah, I don't like this part here. Let's make him go forward earlier. So just by moving that in world mode, it will give me a spike there, which will tell me where my curve, how it needs to flow. So that looks better. Okay. So I will spend most of my time on that, just making sure that works. Let's go here. I'll probably take a break here and, just take a walk and then come back and look at that bouncing ball again, because this is the most important section of the body. Everything will, especially the upper body, will work from here, from that bouncing ball. And the rest is going to be so much easier. Let's go to the graph editor again. I really want to work on the up and down a little bit more here. Goes up, down, jiggles. Okay. So he's kind of dying at the end there. And that's because I didn't have enough poses at the end. But I'm going to make it more alive using animation layers. So once I have that ball, which is, that root control, I'm just going to open up, basic overlay scripts, just bake it down. So everything is on ones. And now I can, get rid of that ball there. Okay. So if I like the weight on it, I'm going to start working on different body parts. And I'll move up the chain. So you can see there I worked on this, and you will see a lot of animators, they work this control first, and then they move up the spine. They work on this one. There's another one there. So they work up this way to the shoulders, all the way to the hands, to the head, and then they go down to the feet by just polishing the whole thing up. And what I'm going to do is very similar, but for the spine, I'm going to isolate the spine here. So let me show you what that looks like. So notice what happens when I move this middle spine. Let me just rotate it. Notice what happens to the head, the neck, and the arms. Everything is moving together with the spine there. But if I want to exaggerate the spine, if I move this, like the whole body's going to move with it. And I want to keep the head a little bit more stable there. So I'm going to go here. Let's go to perspective view. And we're going to use knot orients. Knot orients will lock we're going to lock this upper arm area and the neck area so it's into world space. So let's select the upper arm. Okay. And let's select the base of the neck. And let's hit knot orient. It will give me 3 locators. Now, I isolated this section basically where I can exaggerate it. So if I have a C shape, I can push that C shape a little bit more while the head will try to stay stable. So take a look at this really quick. Now when I move this spine, the head and the arms, they try to stay stable. So I isolated that section there. Okay, let's delete this. I'm going to select all of the controllers of the spine. So 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to add that to an animation layer. And now we're going to go almost straight ahead and exaggerate these poses. Let's open up the timeline here, open up this one. So again, change the timing on the hips, and now I'm going to add more delay and lead in the spine by going straight ahead in an animation layer. Let's go to world mode, set a 0 key there on that animation layer. Remember, all 3 controls are selected. So I'm going to go here and just exaggerate some of these poses. My pose exaggeration doesn't stop at blocking. It keeps going until the end of the animation. So here I exaggerated it. I'm looking at it. Can I delay that upper body a little bit when he comes down? So when the hips start to go this way, maybe I can keep dragging him that way. You see what I'm doing there? This body part is leading, and I'm using rotations to drag him this way. So I'm breaking down the motion instead of like doing it in my pose out. If you ever get confused, like if you ever get like, okay, this pose kind of breaks, you can always hit 0 here and it will go back to your base layer. So but I'm going to go straight ahead. Let's drag that upper body this way. Let's set a 0 key here. Let's keep dragging the body this way. And then let's snap him into that punch pose. But let's exaggerate that punch a little bit more here. Let's show his back to the camera. Right there. And if you want to see how pushed it is, you can always turn this back on and off. You can compare your spine what you had before. The cool thing about animation layers is you have this clean layer here where you can just, go straight ahead. All right, here, set a 0 key there. Let's lead. Let's drag that back arm like that. I like this pose a lot. Let's keep dragging that body there. So 0 key. Let's exaggerate that pose a little bit more. Let's dip him down too. So we get that nice shape here in the body. So I overshot him. Let's keep overshooting him. So he holds that pose a little bit longer. Zero this out. So notice how I'm pushing my poses, right? Like, so I can push that spine to get an S shape in the body. And everything is isolated, so I'm only working on the spine there. I need to fix that leg. Notice how I can start bringing his body this way so I can get a better shape on the spine. So let's do this. So he doesn't lose his balance. Here, let's bring his body this way. And then he can go into the last pose here. So I don't like this overshoot. Let's delete that key so he directly goes into that pose. All right, so that was one layer. And we're gonna work on different body parts now. So notice how in this one I grabbed 3 controls. We can even like number it here. We grabbed all of the 3 controls. And now if I want to exaggerate the spine a little bit more, I can add this one, these last 2 in another animation layer. And then I can create another one and I can work on this one. So I'm working up this way. I'm just fine tuning the spine a little bit more. I'm looking at what's dragging, what's leading. Okay. So let's grab these 2. Those are already in that animation layer. And let's exaggerate some of these poses. So I can push it a little bit more. Let's add more drag. Go straight ahead. I don't like this pose. We need to fix that. Maybe I can drag his upper body a little bit and then he can come to a settle here. But notice how, I exaggerated very quickly without going into the graph editor. And I can fine tune the last one here, which is the top one. And we can just still go straight ahead. We can even drag the upper body here when he comes down. See that? Just fine tune the whole spine very quickly. And what I like about this workflow is you just get a feel of what you need to do next because you already have the base motion here, right? And we even have it here, and we're just like fine tuning on top of it what we already have. So it's very easy to go straight ahead once you have the base motion because you're not getting lost. The base motion tells you where your poses need to be. Notice how I can drag that chest. I can do something like that. Okay. So the timing is kind of slow, but I don't really care about timing at this point. Like I can always retime my shot towards the end of the animation as well, because I'm not afraid of like being clean at this point. Like it's just blocking, and I can just go to ones, and since I'm working on ones, I'm used to working on ones, working on motion capture. It's very easy for me to like fix these things. Let's look at it from the top view. Another view that I like to view from. Okay, let's move on to the head. So I got this from the yoga class that I used to go to. The instructor was always saying, your head is an extension of your spine. So, and I'm gonna support what the spine is doing with the head. But another note here is that if you want something to look a little bit like professional, trained, or scary or intimidating, like a fighter or an animal, if you look at them, they try to keep their head stable. Like if they're like fighting you, they always kind of want to keep their gaze at you at all times, right? If you look at an animal chasing a prey, like a tiger, their head is always like locked in. Same thing with fighters; they always want to see where the punch is coming from. So we're gonna grab all these three. Do the same thing with the spine. Notice how I grabbed the three controls, and we're just gonna get some rough poses in there. I want him to look at us with those three controls. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I just want to get some rough shapes in there. Zero that out. Here's kind of leading with, let's lead with the chin. Here, let's turn his head. Let's give it an S shape here with the head. And he's always looking at you. He's a trained fighter. So I don't like this part. Let's delete that. Okay. So that was three controls. I'm going to move on to the next two. Remember, I'm working up the chain. And we're just going to polish this head a little bit better. Okay, let's lead with the head. Let's save it. Let's turn the head. So he's starting to look at you when he turns. And boom, he got you here. I need to work on this kick. What if I do something like that? Okay, let's bring his head up. And then he comes down. Okay. So I kind of brought his head up there when he kicks. I kind of like it. And let's work on the last control, which is the head. So this is, we'll fine tune the motion here. And notice how my keys, like I can go faster and faster like this once I have that base motion. Okay. So that was the head. I kind of like this where he looks up when he kicks. I'm going to bring up that foot a little bit more up. So it'll be something like that, I think. Boom, boom, boom. All right, let's merge it. All right, so that was the spine and the head. Now we're going to work outwards from the body again. So I'm going to lock in just like I did, right? Like I told you guys, like it's important to work outwards. Like I don't want to go out and like polish up the arm first and then go back to the hips. It makes more sense to animate inside out, right? So the motion is coming from the hips. And then let's move on to a different body part here. So I put these upper arms into world space temporarily, okay? And I'm just gonna delete these really quick. Okay, so it will go back to what it was doing before, which is into the body space. So let's delete this one as well. So my animation is doing the same thing, but I'm gonna put the shoulders in orient space, and I'm going to show you why I do that. So instead of selecting the upper arm, I'm going to grab the shoulders. Let's just put the shoulders inside a world space, only rotations, right? So now I'm free to exaggerate this one, right? I want to keep the shoulders for now. I'm just going to work on the upper arm so I can push these punches a little bit more. If like when he comes here, right, maybe I can drag that like that. Maybe I can, when it comes here, maybe I can overshoot that hand like that in an animation layer, not in my core posing. Okay. So same thing. We're going to grab that upper arm, add it to an animation layer, and we're going to look for nice poses. Let's zoom in. Time slider. There's our animation layer. This is why animation layers are amazing. I like that pose. He's blocking his face. I'm not sure about this. Okay, let's see. Right, he's blocking his face still. I want him to be professional. Block that face. Here, I can, make this stronger. And whenever I'm doing these pose out, I'm still paying attention to the main posing principles. Like I'm still, even though I'm like exaggerating these things, I'm still looking at the whole body as the line of action and everything. Hold on, let me pause. Okay, so still I'm looking at the line of action when it like I know if I push that elbow here, I can get a stronger line of action this way, right? So this elbow will support this line here. Boom. I can even use some translation here just to cheat a little bit. I can zero this out. I kind of like that pose there. What if I drag that arm so it's like a bigger haymaker? Let's make that sharper, and maybe we can even use some translation just to push that arm out there. Let's look at it from the top view. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Here, since I use translation, I'm just going to zero it out so it snaps back into place. A little bit of overshoot there. All right, so I'm thinking, okay, what can I lead with? Can I just drag this and maybe I can lead with the elbow there? And same thing goes for the spine, right? I'm looking at what can I lead with? What can follow? And if I ever get confused, I can always zero it out. Look, there's a nice line of action here. See that? Okay. Let's delete that. Here, maybe I could bring that arm up here. Let's still keep that arm near his face. Now he's punching himself. Let's see. Okay. So I exaggerated that arm, but that's only the upper arm. Now we can move on to the lower arm. Maybe I can find ways to drag that lower arm a little bit more. Let's go to gimbal mode, and I'm just going to work on this rotation here, which is rotate Z. Let's add that to an animation layer. And I'm going to find spots where I can drag this up and down. Since this is a hinge joint, I can only work with one control here at a time. But notice how things are like breaking down now, right? Things are moving at different speeds. The spacing is different. What if I drag? Let's just lead with the fist there. I can even use translation here. Look at that. Let's use it slightly. Zeroed it out. So I want to be very careful when using translation. I always want to go back to zeroing it out. Because if I have an arm like this, like it will keep it like that, right? So I always want to zero that out. Okay, I like this pose a lot. Maybe I can do something like that there. Okay. The ending kind of sucks, and that's because I didn't do enough pose out. That's my mistake. And the timing is a little times is pretty slow, and I'll show you guys how to exaggerate some of this timing later. All right, so let's move on to the wrist. So the wrist is, I'm not going to do a lot of work here on the wrist because it should be supporting what the elbow is doing. You know, if you know about boxing, they always tell you to keep your wrist like straight, like don't bend it like this if you punch something. So I want to keep the wrist most of the time like straight like that, and it's already doing that. So I'm not going to focus on the wrist, but you can go in there if you find something, if you want to add a little bit drag. I'm not going to do it for now. So let's move on to this arm. Let's go to object mode and let's exaggerate this arm here. again. Can I push this pose? Can I do something like that? Like, you know, if I was exaggerating this a little bit more, maybe I can do something like that. But that looks too much. I can drag that and I can get a more straight punch here. Let's get a better line of action here, like that. Let's lead with that elbow. Let him protect his face because he's professional. If I hit 7, that arm was doing this, but if I drag it here, I can get a better silhouette. Okay. Save it, merge it. Now, if I want to, you know, offset different body parts again, let's say I want to offset the shoulders a little bit. I can always come here to the shoulders. Let's open up over rig scripts. And we can these into world space, you know, like we can just bake it down and get rid of those 2 locators that I created for the shoulders. And instead of doing a knot orient, we can do a knot. So we have this. And I can, you know, offset this. Let's offset it 2 frames. So it looks ridiculous, but I can get like little bit of bounce there. So the shoulders are delayed. But that is too much. So instead of doing 1 frame, I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, which is 0.3. It's not even 1 frame. So the shoulders will drag a little bit even more there. I can do that with different body parts. I can grab this. If you have something cartoony, we can, let's put 2 on these. So mid chest and then this, and we can offset 1, 2, and then we can offset this 1, 2. So notice how the chest will have a slight bounce now. So I'm breaking I'm breaking the translation so it gives that effect of delay. Kind of looks like mocap now, like jitters and things are moving at different speeds. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the feet now. The feet is the most of my time that I will spend, even if I'm animating creatures, I'll probably spend most of my time on the hips and the feet. I'll show you why, because animating the feet in the graph editor, it makes more sense. Because just like the bouncing ball, notice how this is too slow here, right? When he hits the floor. It would make more sense if I just, you know, open this up and go to the graph editor and just treat it like a bouncing ball. Like I can break this tangent. I can give more hang time. And now I can quickly, you know, make that slam there into the floor there. We can do that. With the feet, I like to do a lot of space switching. Let's actually bake everything down. I'm going to use this tool here, button, bake, source, and delete. And it will bake the animation to my rig, and we'll get all of the locators. We'll clean up the scene, basically. So I'm back to my original rig. All right, so let's talk about the feet here. A lot of rigs, they have these controllers called, roll, angle, what is it? Swivel, stuff like this. But I only like to use translation and rotation. And if I want to clean up something, I just like to use the knot offsets. So while my leg is selected, I'm going to go, the leg controller selected, I'm going to do a knot offset. And let's bring that knot offset to a point where I want to polish. So I'm going to bring it down here where the ball is. And I'm going to click an empty space in the viewport. Now it will bake the data for me, but this is my new pivot point. So I can only clean up this point instead of working with roll, whatever, all these controllers, especially like these ones as well. Like I don't need to work with these. I don't need to work with these. I have this. I can polish up this point and then I can move on to a different point. So for the feet, you'll probably like whenever you're going from pose to pose method to blocking into splines, you'll probably get like a lot of like floaty feet, like here. You see that? That's very normal because your feet will require a lot of keys. So another mistake that a lot of animators do is they tend to like stick the feet to the floor. If like they just like delete some keys here and they're like, okay, yeah, my feet, he's standing there, so the foot is not supposed to move. So I'll just delete keys. That's very wrong. I've seen a lot of like even senior animators do this where they're doing a walk cycle and they just like nuke all of the keys there, which is it's so stupid to do that because like if you look at motion capture data, there's your feet are always moving, and there's always movement in the human body. Like there's fat here that goes into the floor, like squashes. If you're wearing a shoe, or if you're wearing a boot, there's always movement when you're shifting your weight. So it's a good idea to always keep movement with the feet and just keep them alive, right? Especially if you're working for like realistic things, even cartoony. So here I kind of cleaned up that part, but notice how, let's find some spots where that foot is dying. Like right here, that foot is dying, right? You can kind of see if I scroll here, from here to here, I can add that to an animation layer really quick. I can add some motion. Just keep that foot alive. See that? Merge it. But let's first focus on the spacing. So I'm going to go to the graph editor, and this is where I spend a lot of time on my curves. Like the bouncing ball, I will find spots where that foot feels floaty, like right here. You can even see it in the curve there. It's like super straight. That goes like this, just like the bouncing ball. I can delete some of these keys. I can set a key here and just give more hang time. Even make that hit earlier like that. Okay. Maybe it can go into the floor a little bit there and bounce off. So I'm looking for those moments where the feet feels floaty, and I just take care of those really quick. And sometimes use timing tool to offset things left and right. So let's say this foot still feels floaty here, right? What I can do is just select all of these controls, and using the retime tool, I can put a retime here, double click, and here, and I'll put a placeholder here, and I can just squeeze this down So I know my foot will hit earlier there into the floor. Okay. So I polished one point, right? And I can always go back. I can select that controller, bake it, delete that locator, and now I can work on a different point. Let's say I want to clean up the heel. I can do a not offset here, and I can only clean up this part. So now I have this instead of working with those controllers there. Let's say the foot is coming down here. Let's go to front view. Let's say I want to lead with the heel first here. The heel hits first, and then in one frame, I will slam that foot there. So notice how I did that with that new pivot point, and it looks more natural. And I can still keep the foot alive there. I can focus on this point. Notice how it goes very linearly out here. I can fix those. We can put that foot into the floor a little bit. So I'm adding those like little imperfections that motion capture gives me. And I learned this from working with motion capture. If you look at motion capture feet, you will see all of this stuff, those imperfections in the body. Okay. Here, this pivot feels very bad. Like notice, I'll find a spot where a pivots from, and maybe we can just do some locator pivots. Let's see. Let's find a spot. Let's just pivot with the ball here. So I'm going to go merge this. Let's create a new pivot point. You can create pivot points on top of pivot points with this workflow. So go here, not offset. We can put a new pivot point here, and we can just polish up this one. So let's find a spot where that foot is hitting the floor. Okay, right there. I can add that to an animation layer and shift select that point where I want him to pivot from. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to go here inside the key tools, which is an amazing tool here, and I'm going to click T. So I'm going to lock all the translations, so I'm left with the rotations there. So notice how it will pivot from that very specific point, and here I can go back to 0. Again, how I said like you don't want your feet to die. Notice how the translation is dying now. But the beauty of this tool is that you're not deleting keys. You're just counter animating the translation keys on ones, so it's sticking in place. So let's go to the graph editor. Let me show you what that looks like. This motion here, when I hit T, I told it to pivot point, counter animate yourself so you can stay in that spot. And I'm not deleting keys, keep in mind. I'm just counter animating it to stay there. But if I want to use a little bit of translation, like what I had before, I can tone this layer down to, let's say, 70%, and I will still get some translation there. So it keeps the feet alive. Okay? Merge it. So you do the feet like that. And notice how I didn't animate the ball of the foot. You can do the same thing with the ball. Where is it? This one. You can add this to an animation layer and just, let's say here, we can just go straight ahead and start delaying these things. Right? We can do something like that maybe. So you keep doing that and just take care of the spacing, right? I'm going to show you some other different cool things here. Space switching. This is how I animated the hips, but I didn't animate his pelvis here. Let's just go back to the origin control. I'm just going to go bake source and delete. Now I'm back to this control. But let's go to, let's animate this one here. Okay. And let me show you some cool tricks on like how to think about space switching. So this control is out here. This is the, what is this called? Hip swinger. I don't know why they put it there. It should be like more at this area. So let's go here. Let's put a knot orient on it. And let's grab this. Which foot is he kicking with? This one. Let's grab this one and this one. Let's put a knot on it. And I'm going to grab this pole vector and I'm going to put it inside this foot. Inside. But the animation doesn't break. That's the thing with the basic override scripts. You're not breaking the animation. And then we're going to put this inside the hip swinger. Inside. And now look, I can, with this kick, I can drag that kick a little bit more from the hips. And it will only affect that leg there. You can do stuff like this. Right? So I changed the space. I put that inside the hip space. So, and I can temporarily, do stuff like delaying, this, we can delay it. So it's like an FK leg almost. And we can just clean that up. And if I want to take out these spaces outside back to world space, I can grab these two. I can put this into world, and then I can put this into world. So they're back into world space. So when I move this now, it won't affect. And now I can only polish the hips. Like, I can, when he puts the weight on it, I can pop that pelvis and go back to normal. Right. And we can even brute force this kick here with using arc trackers. We can get a better. There you go. So there's a cleaner kick there. And we can just bake source and delete. So I'm back to the original break. That's the workflow, right? This is a very fast workflow, especially when you're working from games. You can literally go from blocking into polish mode by just going like this, thinking about space switching. And some animators will be like, if you're working in films, I heard about some animators, they prefer to, give their scenes in a very clean way. Like they don't like bake data. I heard about this a long time ago. Like they want to keep everything very clean. So if you work in a studio like that, you can always, select all of your controllers. And you can be like, you can go to keys, edit, keys, bake simulation, and bake your animation on 2s or something. And now you're kind of left with this 2 frames. You have a you have a pose there. So this you can show this as your blocking as well, if that's how your director prefers to see things. But I don't recommend doing this, but only if you, or if you're doing something very stylistically, you can, go to these poses, exaggerate them. Well, let me take that back. Okay. Bake source and delete. Get rid of that. So again, like I said, I don't really care about timing out my, like I can even time out my shot towards the end of the animation. Like I'm very free with these things. I don't really care about being organized. So let me do a demo on retiming your shot, and then we'll just end it there. So here, notice some parts are very slow. Like I can definitely speed up some of these things here. So here we can use this tool, retime marker right here. And I'm going to go to the punch pose and just put a placeholder here, and I can squeeze this way. Notice what happens when I squeeze it this way. It gets tighter. That means it will go faster. Let's do the same thing here. Make it a little bit faster. Okay. Cool. And you can always, bake your animation down, edit, keys, bake simulation, or you can use basic over rig scripts to bake your animation down on ones. So you're left with the original rig. So you don't have any locators. When you pass it to another animator, everything is super clean. Cool. So that was it. And thank you for watching.